So this is a continuation of the project that Stephen Wester was starting to present previous semester, and I think I was taken over when he needed to go to the class. So there is an objective challenge in the community, which I think we can do eventually as a group. So it is a global challenge that we can try to buy. The material that we try to deal with is planar ruthenium chloride, and in the images that I'm going to show, there will be no ab initio data. It will be all, and there will be no pen and paper derivations. It will be all modeling on MATLAB. So some and the interesting aspect and challenge for this material happens from the fact that there is no single ground state. So it's a real existing material, but at 0 Kelvin, there is a dramatic number of degenerate microstates that have the same energy. So if one would try regular codes in order to find the ground state, it will fail or it will panic. So we can try to do some auxiliary computations or violate symmetry to lift the degeneracy. But this material, based on experiments and expectations, it is expected to have substantially degenerate ground state. The material here is ruthenium chloride, and I'm showing only ruthenium atoms. So they form honeycomb lattice, same as graphene, and chlorines are removed, and ruthenium-3 atoms are filling this periodic, you see, honeycomb lattice, and the minimalistic unit cell has only 2 these ruthenium atoms. So they interact to another unit cell through boundary conditions, and also one can fabricate the periodic cell with 90 degrees angle. But then the size of the unit cell will be not minimalistic. It will be something like, I think, 4 ruthenium atoms. It takes this part. It will be periodic in X and Y, but it will be twice as bigger. And for the sake of computation, one may it's beneficial to use this non-orthogonal unit cell. The amount of ruthenium neighbors for each of the transition metal ions is 3, and this is the key for exotic properties, for multiple, for degeneracy of the ground state. So if spins, so each of the ruthenium atoms is in the 3rd state, which means it has 1 unpaired spin. And through spin-spin interaction, this specific number of neighbors brings system in so-called frustration. So if one spin tries to be driven by others, there are several ambiguities how to arrange. So how to arrange all spins so that energy will be minimal. And this property of magnetic frustration gives this degeneracy of a ground state. Why it is interesting? So of course it is challenging because it immediately violates everything we told about DFT and single determinant. So it's definitely a challenge. But what are the benefits? So the degeneracy of the ground state means that infinitesimal amount of energy that one submits to ground state will immediately excite the system. So it has similar nature to the phenomena like superconductivity. So by zero excitation energy, one can create excitations and make them move. So this is there is a challenge and there is a benefit. If we are looking on practical applied science, instead of theoretizing some abstract concepts, it is practical to select a small practical goal, an observable that one can measure on experiment and compute in some modeling. And there are a couple of observables that one can associate with this system. So magnetization, just summation of all magnetic moments of all ions. Total energy, when one takes energy of each microstate, multiplies it by probability to find this microstate by boson at a given temperature and adds together. And third thing is heat capacity. When one computes total energy at each temperature, save it in a file or in a variable, and then makes derivative over temperature. So how the system is able to accept external energy. So it is. It seems quite simple and practical, observable, that hopefully can be compared with experiment and is doable for modeling. There is a code that I believe I was sending it by email, and I can send it over. But here is the flow chart of the code, because it's about 300 lines and it's not elegant, so it's a little torture to read. But I'm going just to give a brief overview, and any feedback and especially criticism is very much appreciated at each stage. So there are about 6 units in this code. So first one sets up parameters, and basically for these calculations, it's in some sense one can call it ab initio, because the parameters are quite well. Magnetic field is external parameter, cell size it is objective thing, and the only thing which is not ab initio that and where we can compare this modeling procedure with DFT or other structure calculations are values of spin-spin coupling. So in the code, the value of spin-spin coupling, which means how the energy of two electrons localized in one ruthenium and another will change if you split one spin compared to another. So this parameter can be computed from, let's say, from VASP by using non-collinear or spin polarized DFT with constraints. So the second unit is set up this curvilinear, not curvilinear, but not rectangular unit cells, periodic boundaries, and Hamiltonian. The energy of the model, which includes only spin-spin interaction and splitting of energies due to magnetic field, same like Zeeman. I show it later, and it is quite standard equation. So then the actual calculation goes in the cycle for temperature, where for each value of temperature there are a range of procedures repeated, and the goal of these procedures inside a cycle for temperatures is to compute energies, total energy of the system at given temperature. So bring in contributions from all microstates. So prior to computing these contributions to internal energy, to total energy, one needs to make sure that partition function and energy that we are computing does include the global minimum if it is available. So this is a little practical experience from success and failure. So without this unit number 4, the amount of numerical noise, the error bar becomes larger than positive result. So if in some cases ground state indeed exists, unlike our expectations, it needs to be found. Otherwise, it will be a big numerical noise. And to find the ground state, one just needs to perform optimization procedure. Randomly select, same as in VASP, the code starts with random density, random wave functions, and then starts converging procedure, changing it here and there until energy minimizes. So here, one just flips spins, finding such configuration of spins that minimizes energy. And in both Unit 4 and Unit 5, one uses a subroutine that fabricate random microstates just by random number generator. It randomly tosses spins up and down. There is another approximation. To process further this direction, one needs to jump from Ising to Heisenberg to allow non-collinear spin. And here, for simplicity, it has only z projections of spin, which is a strong approximation. But otherwise, it will be too much to do at once. So there is a subroutine that is being called both when one optimizes spin configuration to find the microstate with minimal energy. And later on, so this microstate with minimum energy will be first term in the partition function. And then one goes over cycle over random microstate. So repeat procedure until patience expires, and takes random microstates, and for each of them contribute both on distribution, contribution to the total energy, and contribution to magnetization. Why? How many steps are done inside this cycle or random microstate? The number of iterations in this cycle technically can be made equal or bigger than total number of microstates if our simulation cell is small enough. But as soon as we grow size of the simulation cell, the number of possible microstates will be 2 to the power of number of sites, number of atoms. And this number escalates quick enough, and if we go above certain threshold, it will be not possible or too expensive to go to systematically scan all possible microstates. Therefore, one randomly picks here and there, and if amount of this exemplified microstates is large enough, the results start to converge. And these two segments, 4 and 5, are repeated for each temperature, and as a result, at the end, one stores the total energy, as function of temperature. And then by practicing derivative, one can find the heat capacity and analyze it. So suppose this code is created without errors, which is not guaranteed. What is the research plan? So as a sanity check, one may explore several regimes. So the main parameter is the spin-spin coupling, and there are the actual regime that one needs for realistic modeling is when coupling is positive. But prior to this, one may check that some artificial regimes where this coupling has different sign. So when it is negative, it facilitates formation of ferromagnetic phase, which is not of the interest for this material, which will be not correct scientifically if one compares the experiment. But most ferromagnetics are similar to each other, and there are some general features that one may reproduce and get feeling that it is correct. Another regime when spins do not interact to each other. So it is one of then it will be equivalent just to ensemble to collection of independent spins which are driven up or down depending on a temperature. And this is known Curie law when this energy and magnetization are linear in temperature, and it is another sanity check. And then after completing this test, one can explore the model at realistic value of the for antiferromagnetic coupling when opposite direction of spins has minimum of energy when it is preferred. So if one wants to make a plan what to do at each value of this coupling, so there are same steps like A, B, and C. So since we are computing collection of microstates, we can save their energies. And the energies of microstates can be visualized in the same way as we do for the density of states in ab initio computation. So we can explore at which range of energies states are more dense. And in the final stage of the project, there should be a really large density of states close to minimal energy. It should start with degeneracy should be seen. For ferromagnetic, it should be a single ground state. It should be also seen. So I will show some results only for the non-realistic part J less than 0. And it is only the start of this activity. Hopefully that there will be more researchers involved in it, and maybe we'll get through. And by putting foot in the door into this substantial multi-configurational problem, we can eventually approach other multi-electron effects such as superconductivity, which is related to the project that Yvonne has completed now. Okay, so visualization of microstates. I know it is not perfect and maybe it's substandard, but I was trying to draw this lattice where green dots corresponds to positions of the ruthenium atoms, and these sticks protruding up or down correspond to spin up or down. So the total number in this 4 by 4 unit cells, so in this simulation cell, total number of sites is 32, and here is just an example. If we randomly select for each spin to be up or down, it's a possible configuration. So here there are red 24 red up, 8 blue down, and 16 out of them are unpaired, which means if each of the unpaired spin has spin 1/2, then total magnetization will be 8 times geomagnetic ratio. And similar examples, if one tries to repeat this random selection, one can get different values of magnetization by imbalance of up and down spins. So if this experiment, a little visualization experiment, is repeated frequent enough, the probability to have zero magnetization are larger. There are larger number of states with approximately equal number of spins up and spin down, and there is a equation for this compute the probability for each of the configurations. So after checking that the unit for generating a microstate does work, one can find a minimum, run over cycle over microstates, and store them in the same format of the file as we do for density of states. So visualization of this states is microstates is a little bit unusual because the values are changing by several orders of magnitude, and some critically important things are not visible. But if one practices logarithm, if one plots it in a log scale, then one does see contribution from the ground state. So this is calculation for coupling less than 0, which means for spins oriented in parallel, the energy will be minimal. So there is only one state when one state when all of them are up, and one state when all are down. And the offset from other states is determined by this J coupling and magnetic field. So how to interpret this little peaks in this density of states is question number one. And second, maybe one can make connection between this logarithmic representation of density of states and entropy of the system, which is related to logarithm of microstates. So if there is only one, if we explore a system at 0 temperature, and only ground state there is ground state and it is occupied, so by taking logarithm of 1, one will get minimal entropy. And if one would have the peak of the density of states near the edge, then the entropy will be substantially non-zero even at zero temperature. Log of number of states. So if one looks into the all microstates and one tries to interpret them, then they will be corresponding to this individual peaks will correspond to different magnetization. And since magnetic field is non-zero, this distribution is non-symmetric. In absence of magnetic field, it would have the maximum at antiferromagnetic configuration when number of spins up and down is equal, and number of peaks in this distribution corresponds to possible number of discrete values of magnetization. So if we start to explore this system by cycle over microstates, by trying to populate them thermally, then depending on the value of temperature, it will occupy those that are thermally accessible. So part of the states will be occupied. If we increase temperature further, it will increase, it will populate larger fraction of the microstates. And depending on the occupation of each microstate by thermal Boltzmann factor, one can find contribution of this energy, of this specific energy into total energy, and magnetization of this certain microstate or family of microstates into the magnetization. So, and it is all for J smaller than 0. The two figures here show the total energy as function of temperature, and as soon as we increase energy temperature in the range below the second microstate, as soon as we have only ground state when all spins are parallel occupied, the energy is not changing. So it is state when all spins are parallel, and before thermal energy is sufficient to flip at least one spin, it doesn't change. So at some energy we have up and maybe one down. And as we go further and further, we approach total number of spins up and spin down to be equal, and the energy will approach to 0 plus correction from magnetic field. So, and if one takes derivative of this dependence, it will have maximum, and then will decrease at some value, which corresponds to the peak in the heat capacity should correspond to the peak in the density of states when largest number of microstates are getting repopulated with small increment of temperature. So I flip one slide back. So when we are going by population between in this area of maximum, it means by small increment of temperature, one will thermally access a larger number of states. So the system will accept more energy and will have the maximum heat capacity. This observable is something that one should look into literature and try to compare after we get into the correct value of the spin-spin coupling. So this result is only a little guinea pig for predominantly wrong value of J. So when it will be correct, this figure will change drastically. Another observation that there are a couple of outliers, and number of outlying data decreases if one performs cycle over larger and larger number of microstates, but it starts expiring human patience. So here, the number of microstates at each temperature was about 20,000. So it's already give just a couple of outliers, and lines are more or less continuous. Another little experiment is to follow magnetization, which means magnetization of microstate times probability of this microstate, and then add them together. So when all spins are collinear, then magnetization is extremal. It's like 16 unpaired electrons, or 32 unpaired electrons, 1/2 each, so minus 16. And as one approaches, as more and more spins are flipped by thermal excitation, this number decreases. And this is related to transition from ferromagnetic to paramagnetic regime. So para and this ferromagnetic. Okay, that's all what I was able to do. I don't know if it is a generally right direction to explore, because we already have kind of niche in the community and nice codes working in the group, and experts who know how to operate and be competitive. But if we try to expand, maybe it is another direction, because it's an interesting challenge. And out of possible directions to explore this problem, it is less than 1/3 is done. So it's only test for predominantly wrong value of coupling, but by now it looks at least qualitatively reasonable, and it could be interesting to go forward and explore other regimes, and bring in comparison to experiment, and bring in comparison to ab initio data to specify the value of this coupling. Done. So any questions, suggestions, and criticisms are very much appreciated, even if they are not pleasant. If there will be criticism like, forget this, do whatever you can do better.
I guess one question that I thought of is for your density of states in slide 13. Like, why isn't it metric? I guess because I would guess that like there's equal amounts of like minus 16 to 16. So I guess just based off, like without thinking about it very much, I would expect it to be like pretty centered around 0. Or for the distribution to be kind of symmetric, since there's equal and opposite like microstates.
I do have an answer, and I will formulate and offer it. I'm just not comfortable with letters I and J because they're used too often. So if we have sides I and J, and we have spins up and down in this variable S, then the energy is composed of the spin-spin interaction. And interaction to magnetic field, Zeeman splitting. And I hypothesize that presence of these both mechanisms does create this non-symmetry.
Okay, so for these calculations, it's with the magnetic field on.
Yes, and without magnetic field, it will be yes, it's always with magnetic field, and there is reason in it. So it's also one can either learn it from reading or from story of failures. Without magnetic field, this model becomes unstable and error bars substantially increase. It is one of the reasons why I did explore this ferromagnetic regime with J less than 0. So if there is a ferromagnetic state, if magnetic field pushes it down to the energy, there is only one ground state, and it removes this strange, unusual effect of degeneracy of ground state. So it is much more stable, and error bars are smaller. If one removes magnetic field, the splitting, this density of states will be much narrower, and the large amount of occupied degenerate states means that as we add more and more terms to partition function and to the expectation values, they do not converge. They experience bigger fluctuation. So in this situation, when we have this ferromagnetic state, it has, since it is really huge energy difference, it means that partition function corresponds primarily from this e to the power minus this ferromagnetic state, magnetic or pt, plus negligible terms. So as soon as energy is smaller than this gap, it really, the whole partition function is contributed only by one term, which I know that it doesn't answer the main challenge, and it is kind of attempt to escape the challenge. But at least in this little domain, it is good numerical stability. I should admit that I didn't answer your question. I only expressed some hopes and comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense. So it's So without the field, like you have the two potential ferromagnetic states, and so without the field, I wouldn't know which one to be in necessarily, so it doesn't converge nicely.
Yes, and
Okay.
energy will converge more or less. But if one would try to plot magnetization, so it was my biggest headache. If one goes away from this single ground state, this figure will look. Let me draw. Um, so here are these ranges as drawn here, and the actual data are scattered either positive or negative in this range in a wild way. So they do not go over this envelope lines, but it changes between positive and negative, how to say, wildly. I even was about to give up and compute only absolute value like or root mean square of the magnetic moment. But restricting focus to this well-determined ferromagnetic state immediately solved this problem, and now it is much more smooth. So it is a postponed challenge. It is main challenge is not resolved here, but at least in this big problem there is a sweet spot where things are working well.
Mm-hmm.
Temperature manipulation. And I have forgotten which question did you ask.
I originally started with the density of states, why it wasn't symmetric, and then then that turned into like why we needed the field. So it's
Okay.
I think both were covered.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you. I was trying to read literature, and there are interesting trends, and I will not give the details and correct things. So dependencies of on temperature of things like heat capacity in this class of material um, at large magnetic field behave normally, so it with degeneracy. Um, if the magnetic field is average, it shifts to lower temperatures and it also creates some potential danger. And when it tends to zero, goes to zero, then it gives non-zero heat, substantial heat capacity close to zero temperature. So a large magnetic field prevents human brain from exploding, from looking into regimes which violate common sense human intuition. So on one hand, adding magnetic field, it looks like a little challenge to bring something new into the system. But on the other hand, the structure of electronic states becomes more understandable. So it is a regime when one can tell at least something. And by removing magnetic field, it becomes really wild and scary. Okay. Anything else?
I have a technical question.
Please.
So initially you do some Monte Carlo simulations, right?
Monte
Carlo.
Oh, Monte Carlo, yes.
So this kind of calculation is to sample spin states, right?
Yes.
So later you have some density of states. Is that from the average results or from a single run?
Single run.
Okay.
There is a chance to save density of states from each single run and even add them together, because a single run doesn't cover all possible microstates, and by adding together all these random attempts would make it more continuous. Yes, it makes sense. And yeah, thank you. Few seconds more and I'm off the hook. Any other questions? More questions. One. Amir, are you? It's either boring or everything is clear, or it is very far from what you're interested.
Not boring, not clear. It's something between.
Okay, that's fine. Mir, any questions from your side? I know it is far from degradation. Yes, you are starting.
Yeah, no, I'm actually just kind of reading up a little bit on the spin and magnetization kind of mentality. I'm more learning your concepts more than the actual project itself, so I'm just starting to read on that stuff.
Did you develop any questions?
If you go up, I wanted to see the figures again. You had shown 5 slides with this similar figure. So why are you choosing just these 5 examples? Are you said you're going to be doing a continuous amount, correct? These are just 5 out of the many.
It is 5 out of 2 to the power 32.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. To the many. Yep. All right. That was.
So it's no. I think it is too much. 2 to the power 10 is about 10 to the power 3, right? 1,000. So this will be about 4 times 10 to the 9. So 4 gigabytes of data if one configuration takes a byte. So it's doable, but maybe a little too much. So we don't. I was not doing systematic scan of all microstates.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Yep. Many thanks, everyone, for questions.